So here goes USC building a strong foundation on the recruiting trail for 2026. You should absolutely be encouraged by this if you are a Trojan fan. Now, recruiting under Lincoln Riley, I discount the 2022 class. When you have a transition, I don't factor that into really anything. But we've got 3 classes to evaluate for Lincoln Riley and his staff, which has changed over the last couple of years. Coaches have departed. Coaches have been relieved of their duties. Coaches have been hired. This is just the way of college football now. But you've got 3 cycles to evaluate Lincoln Riley and understand what he has accomplished so far is a reflection of the recruiting efforts on the trail and not a lack of resources or not this or that. This is what it is, except it's not. For most coaches, I think that would be the case. But the high school rankings only, I'm not talking about the transfer portal rankings for a total composite class, just high school recruiting, which is still the lifeblood of your program, even in the transfer portal era. The last 3 classes for USC ranked number 8 in 2023, dropped down to 17 in 2024, and rose back up to number 14 in 2025. Now, history would tell you that's not strong enough to compete for a national championship. That's not what USC is trying to do right now. They're trying to just get to the top of the Big Ten. And after this past year, I thought they were going to get there. Turns out they weren't quite ready. But I think USC, despite their record taking a step back, took a step forward in 2025 because they showcase their new defensive coordinator, Danton Lynn. Yeah, he's really good. If he had been there, or anybody good, frankly, I was advocating for USC to hire Jim Leonard a couple of years ago when Lincoln Riley came over from Oklahoma, but alas, that did not happen. Got a year and a half of Alex Grinch, and yeah, that went very poorly. Very poorly. But Lincoln Riley has recognized his mistake, and now USC is trying to flip the narrative about what the Trojans are on the recruiting trail. Is it early in the cycle? Yes, it absolutely is. There's a long way to go. USC has 11 players committed in the class of 2026. So it's not as if their class is close to being complete. Heck, they might not even be halfway to the total number of kids they'll wind up with in this 2026 cycle. But the reason earlier on the show I said, don't start celebrating just yet, like maybe pump the brakes a little bit, is because we saw this from USC a year ago. Now, this is not an entirely negative segment, but this element does have to be discussed. A year ago, don't remember the exact timeline, but USC in total for 2025 had 14 decommitments. Not commitments, 14 decommitments. They brought in a top 15 class. That's good. That's not what USC is fully capable of. But among their decommitments were guys like Justice Terry, a 5-star defensive lineman who flipped to Texas, Isaiah Gibson, a 5-star D lineman who flipped to Georgia, Hayden Lowe, who flipped to Miami. He was a really highly rated recruit. And Jerome Miles, who flipped to Texas A&M. If any one of those guys had stayed committed to the Trojans, which they were all at one point verbally committed to, then USC might have been able to pull in a top 10 class for 2025. And you'd be looking at it differently. But USC has flashed the potential, but they haven't been able to yet finish the deal in 2 ways. Number 1, the decommitments that I just mentioned. So they've got this strong foundation in the class of 2026. They're building a dinner plate. And you've got 3 components typically to a nice dinner plate. You've got your meat, you've got your starch as a side dish, and you've got your vegetables. And they're trying to put together a whole meal, so let's factor in the beverages and the dessert and the appetizer as well. So the appetizer, they've got people hooked, right? They've drawn them in. They've got a night. I'm a big soup guy for an appetizer. They've crushed the soup. The soup has been delivered perfectly. Great temperature, depth of flavor, spices. It's all there, right? The drink's really good. But now you're starting to build the actual plate. And so far, what you have is the right ingredients, but you're still making that meal because it's not a finished product yet. As you saw last year, these things can change because Their top-rated recruit is a linebacker out of the state of Georgia, at least according to 24/7. You think Kirby Smart's going to stop recruiting him? It's not even March yet. Of course he isn't. Of course he isn't. So right now, USC is off to an incredibly strong start, but they need to retain that. So that's the first element. Then the second element for USC and building the sort of roster they're actually capable of, they've got to keep their kids on campus in the long run. Their 2023 cycle was the number 8 class in the country. Their top 5 players, of their top 5 players, 3 of them, the top 3 as a matter of fact, per 24/7's rankings, are no longer members of the program. You had Zachariah Branch, he's at Georgia now. Deuce Robinson, he's at Florida State now. Malachi Nelson is at UTEP, crazily enough, former 5-star quarterback recruit. And we'll see how he does with the minors. I did not see that one coming. But alas, here we are. He lost the job at Boise State, going down another level to UTEP. And hey, maybe it'll work out. Scotty Walden's a pretty good coach. So Makai Lemon and Braylon Shelby are the 2 recruits out of the top 5 that 24/7 had ranked that are still on the roster. And Makai Lemon's really good. I mean, a darn good football player. Number 1 receiver. He is like Drake London, but faster. That's what I see when I watch him. He's a stud. But a lot of highly rated players over the years have transferred out. So those are the 2 aspects of USC's talent acquisition that just simply have to get better. Since 2018, they have only pulled in since 2018, they have not pulled in a top 5 class. At the University of Southern California, this isn't how this is supposed to be. But if they are able to maintain a top 5 level, there's no reason they can't sustain it. Yes, Oregon is a really good place for recruits to go. They just won the Big Ten. They've got plenty of resources. They're flashy. Lanning's a great coach. They just flipped a quarterback from Oregon. Now, that's because Oregon, in part, is going to go after Jared Curtis, the number 1 quarterback in the 26 cycle. But Jonas Williams flipped from Oregon to USC. And this past cycle, Jakeem Stewart, that's a defensive lineman. Dan Lanning's a defensive guy. He went to USC. Don't overlook the importance of recruiting victories like that, because Oregon is the premier recruiting power out west. The rankings reflect that, and I think everybody just kind of knows it. They don't have to be forever if you are USC. So watch and see how they're able to retain the talent. But they are taking a tangible step forward, which is, hey, let's get the high-end talent kids interested in USC. Let's get a couple to commit, and let's build and build and build. And remember, this is the first full recruiting cycle for Danton Lynn at defensive coordinator. And according to 24/7, by the way, Doug Belk, their defensive back coach, is the number 2 recruiter in the country. The potential's there. The amount of talent in Los Angeles is ridiculous. And the brand of USC, it's not what it was, but it's not dead. It's not dormant. It doesn't need to have a Deion Sanders level jump start with a defibrillator to get you going again. No, it just needs to have the right cooks in the kitchen. And right now it looks like they do. But I'm very interested to see if they can flip the script from last year. Because when they had Justice Terry and Isaiah Gibson committed, going, whoa, this is oh, those guys went to the SEC? Oh, okay. Well, you're in the Big Ten. So conference pedigree, don't have an excuse there. NIL, USC should have plenty. Maybe it just comes down to relationships. Maybe, just maybe it can come down. Or maybe it's a different factor, like one of the ones I listed. Every kid is different. But this surge from USC, it is early in the cycle, but this is a strong foundation, and I'm more than a little interested to see how they can capitalize on it, how they finish out this class, and whether that turns into a long-run recruiting success where it's more head-to-head with Oregon for who's the best recruiting team out west.